Welcome everyone to the Mirror Fellowship podcast, where we get a chance to get to know our fellows a little bit better and check in on their projects. Today we have Dart Lindsley from the 2024 cohort.
Yeah, I'm Dart Lindsley, and I have been working toward a future in which every company is an engine for delivering the kind of work that makes people feel whole and alive. And so I have a company now that it was something that came out of Mira to some extent, which is called Elevenfold, and we provide work experience design for companies. I also host a podcast which is called Work for Humans, and that drives a lot of business to the design firm.
So let's go back a little bit. I would love to. I mean, I know that we've interacted a bunch over the last sort of year and a half, but I don't actually know much about your sort of long history. So, well, if we asked you to bring something or bring a memory from childhood that maybe informed some of this work, maybe we could start there. And I'd just love to hear a little about how you got from where you started to here.
Yeah, a memory from childhood. That brought up a lot of things that I could potentially anchor on, but this is the one that I think is most relevant, which is that my parents were scientists, and
Mm-hmm.
I was raised uh, with a very strict empirical way of knowing, to the point where one time I went to my father and I said, "Dad, do you think that there are aliens?" I was just a little kid. "Do you think that there are aliens?" And he said, "It's not worth asking questions that you can't test experimentally." Um, and my whole family was very much in the sciences. But one time, my brother, again, I was just a kid, and he said, "Have you ever noticed that different appliances in the kitchen have different personalities?" He says the garbage disposal is all grumpy, and the blender is sort of uptight, and the oven is dull, and I realized that there was a whole way of perceiving the world that somehow accessed a part of me where I completely agreed with those things. It opened my eyes to the beginning of what became my interest in art, and I eventually went forward to study creative writing, write abstract expressionist fiction, just to become very interested in ways of knowing that are not evidence based, but we still know.
Hmm. And so, is that what you did in college? That in college you studied creative writing, and then
I studied
is it
everything. I I
okay?
uh, I started off philosophy, and then I went into biology, and then I studied something else, and then I studied economics, and I got 3 classes from graduating in economics. Um, at which point I took a break and I went hitchhiking around Mexico to go spearfishing with my buddy. And while I was doing that, I said, "I'm not good at any of those things. I'm not good at. I can do economics, and I can do philosophy, but what am I really good at?" And I
Hmm.
realized I'm really good at words, and
Yeah,
I
okay.
love words, and I think I should spend more time with words. So I changed my major, 3 classes from graduating, to creative writing and literature.
Huh, huh.
Very popular with my parents,
I
as
was
you
going to
can
ask
imagine.
about how that went over.
But also at that point, I said, "Okay, my parents had helped me a lot with college." I said, "That has to be over now. I can't." So I became a maintenance man at at a at a at a local. It was a polo club and a golf club, but it was just a pool club by the time I got there. 150-year-old building, and finished the rest of school as a literature and creative writing major. And then I, the thing about being an artist is you do every job just to make money so that you can keep doing the art. Um, and actually, I might, if we pause for, we don't have to pause anything, but I'm going to just pull up a list of the jobs I had.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay. So here are the jobs I held while I was writing fiction. And this
Okay.
was from about the age of 22 to actually 33. So there's some jobs in
Okay.
here my wife and I say we will never talk about again because I was 33 and I was doing those jobs. I was a dishwasher. I was a dishwasher, a cafeteria runner, a busboy, a parking lot attendant, a handyman, a stalker, not stalker, stalker at SeaWorld, maintenance man and caretaker, hard hat construction worker, county park caretaker, money counter at the cockfights in Pachuco, Mexico, um, a criminal defense investigator for the alternate public defender's office. That was 6 years. Um, University instructor at the University of Colorado, fiction and poetry, writing tutor for students with brain injuries, waiter on wheels. When I was 33, that's the one we don't talk about. I was doing waiters on wheels. I had a bow tie. Um,
Nice.
Independent headhunter, staffing researcher, and then recruiter. And that's when I entered the corporate world and and started on the career that led to my current work.
Wow, I didn't realize there was such a history there. That's fun. That really must have given you a very different view of things. How is that with, I'm still curious to hear about your parents and what that, the like shift from scientific world to creative world. What did that feel like? I feel like I did sort of a similar thing and people think it was really,
Mm.
really dramatic and it actually wasn't as dramatic for me. But I'd love to hear what that was for you.
Um, well, first of all, my parents were really, honestly, quite supportive. Um, my mother said, "Look, we've never had a creative child before, so we don't know what we can do for you that's helpful. Um,
Okay.
but if it takes more schooling, let us know." And they helped with graduate school, which was great.
Okay. Okay, great.
So that was very good. They were, and my father didn't say anything in that conversation. um, so to me, they're just different ways of knowing, and
Hmm.
I think it's incredibly important to use all of them. But I know a
Right.
lot of people who grew up in STEM and have not developed the artistic mind. And in particular, the thing that I tell people is most important about the artistic process is uh, dealing with a blank page.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You have a blank page and you can do anything. Um, what do you decide to do? How do you navigate through from nothing to something in a way that is that's going to work? That doesn't happen very much in STEM. You don't start with nothing.
Right.
You usually start with something, but to start with absolutely nothing. And but I think it's a conversation between those. And what really blew my mind early on was I used to think that the bedrock of knowledge was evidence, um, and I realized in my writing that the bedrock of writing was opinion.
Right.
Um, it was just what you felt. It was what It's in conversation with the analytical part of your mind, um, which is going to stand in judgment and is going to help you make decisions that are more so you don't just end up with a big stack of mashed potatoes. But but um, but that was a really different way of going through the world.
That's so interesting. No, I like the way you put that because I feel like I had um, a similar realization that at some level everything is opinion and like we're just humans pointing our sensors in a direction and then finding something in that direction, but we pointed them
Right.
in that direction and we had a feeling about whatever that was, and then you can sort of back into it, and we've been so sure of the truth of something, and then that truth has completely changed 100 years later, and so like this sense of feeling the truth and knowing the truth is just sort of ephemeral in some way. And I feel like that I
Yeah.
never thought about it that way, the way you just said, but I do feel like going from engineering to filmmaking for me was the same kind of realization of
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah,
I mean,
point where you want to go.
I got to say, pity the filmmaker, I say, because you you have to start with nothing,
Mm.
and then you you write it down, and then you have to transform it into something made of people and light and money. Oh my goodness. At least as a writer, you write it, it's a piece of paper, you can walk away.
I guess that's true, but I
Yeah.
found, at least for me, the hardest part is the writing part because it can be
Oh,
anything. Because what you're saying,
yeah.
it is that empty page, it is these sorts of things, and so it's like you can just stay there. Like that. That's the hardest part. The other part, you get to react to other people and have friends and
Well,
not sit by yourself.
and
It's fun.
it stays discovery, right? It stays discovery. So it's discovery during the writing, but then it's discovery during the development. And so
Right.
I think it's just there's more people involved. That's for sure.
Right. Definitely. Okay, so now tell me from where. So now you move into the corporate world with this kind of background, which I think is must have been really interesting.
Yeah, and to say the kind of artist I was I wrote stuff. I didn't set out to write stuff that nobody wanted to read, but I just couldn't. I could not help um, trying to challenge traditional forms.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I was very interested in abstract expressionist painters, and whenever I set out to write a normal story, I would just veer off into, oh, I think I could try a form that's not a traditional story. And so I did
Right.
a lot of stuff that, and in fact, I published almost everything I ever wrote in literary fictions that all went out of business immediately. And the re- the reason for that is that if you're the avant-garde, uh, and that's who you want to publish, if you're not going out of business, you're not trying hard enough.
True.
And so and so I in fact started a magazine and went out of business because I knew how it was done. And so my wife and I knew we were going to have kids,
Hmm.
twins, and I started looking for a real job. And we moved back from Colorado back to California, partially for food, partially for friends, partially because there's just more ambient money, and
Hmm.
it's where the action was at the time. This was the .com bubble. I started looking for a job, and I became a recruiter.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was not particularly great at that. I was okay.
Uh-huh.
But lots of little trivial instances of things, like little transactions, don't turn me on. I don't like a lot
Right.
of little transactions. I don't like lots of little pieces. Um, but I did that, and that got me into the industry. And then the .com bubble burst, and
Right.
I was like, I had worked in a couple of industries that had ups and downs. I worked in the semiconductor capital equipment industry, and so I knew what a downturn was. And I was at Cisco Systems, and it was full of people who'd never seen a downturn. Um,
Mm.
and I was like, time to find a new job inside here. And so I went over to this other department. I said, "What are you
Mm.
doing?" And they said, "Well, we're building staffing systems." And I found a little space between a cube and the wall. And I dragged a little narrow table in there. It was about 4 feet wide. And I put my phone in there and I put my little name tag on there. And I said, "Me too." And I started helping them to design these things. And I became an
Oh, cool.
analyst. And it turned out that I was a good investigator. My boss will tell you that when I was a criminal defense investigator, I was one of the best that he had. But I was never going to be as good as him. And
Uh-huh.
uh, and as a recruiter, I was never going to be the best recruiter in the world. But in business analysis, I found
Hmm.
that in fact, I am exceptionally good at solving enormous vague problems, really
That's a
vague
good skill. Uh-huh.
and really big. And it
Uh-huh.
started off small with how do you design search for a staffing tool, but it got bigger and bigger and bigger until I was the head of business architecture at Cisco Systems, which is the biggest level of analysis which is how does the whole company fit together end to
Uh-huh.
end, so that this 100,000 person company, when it goes through a transformation, like going into a new market or going into a new route to market or a new method of payment, um, how do you coordinate all the pieces of the company to so that
Hmm.
you can make the transformation? What
So how does that?
capabilities do you need to create in what order to
Can you give any kind of
uh,
example of a transition that you went through, or like
yeah,
I don't even think on that level of like
yeah,
this is 100,000 person kind of thing. Like, what is there a quick
yeah.
example?
So okay, so when you're doing a giant transformation inside a company, you have to hold up your hands and feel the energy of the company. This is a
Hmm.
totally artistic thing. You just hold your hands up and you feel what the heat is, what people want. And then you take that energy the same way a sailboat uses the wind. Sailboats don't all run before the wind. They cut at an angle to the wind.
Right.
And you take the energy, the natural energy of a company, and you use it to take the company where it should go, which is not just running before the wind. You turn it into energy in the right direction. And so
Right.
that's an incredibly like gestalty kind of way of understanding change. Um,
Interesting.
it's a mix
No, I
between
mean, yeah,
the two the
I don't
two
think you
ways of
get there
thinking.
with just STEM. Yeah,
No.
that's okay. That's fascinating. Okay, well, we should probably move. Like, I would love to start to transition this into the where you are now in the project.
Yeah.
Like, where did the idea come from? In given this steering companies with the wind and giant data models,
Yeah.
where
So
did this 11-fold and the stuff behind it come from?
for the first 10 years that I worked in HR functions, I drank the Kool-Aid.
Hmm.
Um, the purpose of an HR department is to serve shareholders. Um,
Hmm.
and in that, and by the way, this was a time when shareholder capitalism was very big, so it was definitely in the air. And I kept coming to the I one of the things I did there is I ran the portfolio, the project portfolio, and what was going to be invested in. And the truth is that when you're lining everything up to shareholders and shareholder value, uh, projects will come across your desk that are about improving employee experience, and you think to yourself,
Hmm.
"That's a really good idea. We should do that." But then right next to it is something that says, "Here's a project where we're going to outsource a function to India." And
Hmm.
the one where you improve people's experience is just much harder to trace to shareholder
Right.
value. And so what you do is you say, yeah, it's a good idea, but if I only have so much money to invest in HR, I'm going to invest in the sure thing.
Right.
and and uh, while I was doing this, I would constantly revisit it because I'd come back to it and I'd say, this doesn't seem right. There's a system here that the logical conclusion of it is that employee experience is the last thing I'm going to invest in, just because it's so hard to
Right.
prove that employee experience ties to shareholder value. So that was one thing. And the second thing was, if that was true, if the only reason to do something good for people in a company was because it would be more profitable, then if I could be mean to people and make them miserable and be more profitable, that would be good too. And so there's this moral problem right at the center of it, which is
Hmm.
uh, if I'm going to make all judgments based upon shareholder value, and shareholder value, I can get more of it by making people miserable, thumbs up. And that's just there's a problem.
Right.
And I would loop back to it and I'd say, yeah, but and the logic kept driving me toward that conclusion over and over again. Well, while I was doing business architecture, a weird thing happened in the models, which is this was after, I was continuing to wonder about this. I built we built the models uh, for the whole company, and employees showed up two places in the models. They
Hmm.
showed up inside the company as inputs to production, But in the models, they also showed up outside the company as customers.
Oh, right.
And at the time, I was like, okay, that's at least weird. Um, uh, maybe it's an artifact of the model. Why would anything show up twice in the model? Was very strange. And so I sort of put that off to the side and said, and a little bit later, I was working on a patent. I did these
Hmm.
as a sort of a hobby while I was at Cisco. Um, and I was working on one that was around, it was creating a marketplace for data. So Internet of Things data is producing all this different kind of data. Well, how does somebody with data find somebody who wants to buy it and vice versa? And so it
Hmm.
was about creating a marketplace for Internet of Things data. Well, that forced me to look at multi-sided businesses and how they
Mm.
function. So any brokerage is a multi-sided business. It has two customers, both of whom need to be satisfied in order to satisfy the other. That's how those businesses run. And they're everywhere. Savings and loans are a really good one because you can say, well, there's savers and people who borrow. You can hear it in the name that there's two different
Right.
customers. And
Right.
so and so so I was like, "Oh, that's interesting because because one customer sees the other customer as an input to production. Uh,
Right.
that they see them as something that they're going to get value out of. But if you look at the other customer in the equation, they see the other one as a supplier. So
Hmm.
both sides of a multi-sided business sees the other side as a supplier of an input that they want.
Right.
And so I realized that's why the models were looking that way. And this worked great because it suddenly gave me a framework that I could use to say, uh, it is bad business to uh, to treat employees like inputs to production, like the traditional model does. The traditional model
Hmm.
sees employees as assets, as inputs to production, as resources, as human capital. These are all words of thingness. So it is morally wrong to do
Right.
that. Anytime anytime I feel that it's okay to neglect your needs as a human, that's wrong because
Right.
neglect is right there next to harm. I can neglect you bad enough and you die. so neglect
Right.
is harm. Neglect is harm. So anytime that happens, that's a problem. And and so uh, uh, I had a framework that said actually, all of a sudden we should really look at employees as customers, and we should start to take that seriously. And once I did that, I said, well, if employees are customers, what are they buying? And
Mm.
I started asking them, what are you buying when you buy work? And the phrase is, what job do you hire your job to do for you? And I started asking people that question, and I started getting answers that didn't sound anything like what all the other books were saying. All the other books said uh, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That's what people want. But I was getting all these strange answers, like I hire my job to give me a stage and an audience. I hire my
Mm.
job to structure my life, or to get out of the house, or to give me a worthy opponent, or to build things, or to solve puzzles, or to uh, to eat only what I kill, is what one person said. like you start getting these things and you start realizing that it's way more complicated than what all of the psychology books, which are focused primarily on productivity. All I want
Right.
from you as an input to production is productivity. Well, if you actually start asking people what they want from work, it's incredibly diverse.
Right.
And that started me down the path of saying, you know, that led to here, which is, uh-oh, if what they're buying is a product of some kind, it's work that they're buying. They want all these different things from work. This customer wants, like, in fact, the research that I've done, out of 100 people, only 2 people want exactly the same thing from work. And
Hmm.
even that's an artifact. If you dug one layer deeper, there's nobody who wants the same thing out of work. And that as a company thinking about building a product for that customer, which is work, and everybody wants something different,
Right.
what do you do? How do you build a product for people who all want something different?
Right.
And that led to realizing that the only people who that first of all, the way we would say it is, how do you scale that? And the answer is,
Right.
you've already got the means of scale inside your company. It's managers. And
Hmm.
managers are the only people in the company who are close enough to employees to know what each individual uniquely wants. And so,
Right.
what 11fold does is we teach managers and teams how to co create an experience of work for themselves in real time. And that's what we do. And this is what I joined Mira to do, actually, which is, I'd been a talking head on this for a long time, and people would say, "Love the theory, man," um, but how do I implement that? And so my project for Mira was to start developing the ability to train and equip managers and
Right.
teams to to run under a completely new management paradigm.
And how's it going? What's the progress at this point? Like, what's happening this week or last week or?
Yeah. Well, I thought about this question. I didn't know for sure you were going to ask it, but I was going to say it's a slog, man. But it's not
No,
actually
I'd say that. I mean, if that's what's going
it's
on.
not actually a slug. It's not really a slog. It's a hike,
Okay.
and it's a long hike, and you're carrying 60 pounds. Um,
Hmm.
you see progress, and you know that part when you're hiking, when you're backpacking, and you're like, oh look, I can start to see the top of the mountain. I'm gonna top out any moment now. And you turn the corner and, like, no way, you've got another 1,000
Right.
meters to climb. And it's like that. It's like, oh, we're topping out on the ridge. No, still not topping out on the
Right.
ridge. So it's uh I'm very energized by rejection. Um this comes to some extent from sending my abstract expressionist fiction out
Oh
into
yeah.
the world over and over again and getting rejected by magazines.
Right.
Um, but my response to uh, rejection is, "Oh, you're gonna regret that." like like I get really uh, I get very, I don't know what to call it exactly, but like uh, agentic. I'm sort of like,
Mm.
I mean, that's just a challenge. I don't know.
Well, so what is it that people are? I mean, if people are excited by the concept, and then you're feeling the hike and the rejections, what's not lining up in your so far?
Well, some of these rejections are, um, I thought I had a literary agent for a book, and it turns out I didn't, and that was a setback. And I thought, I was pretty sure I was going to have a speaking agency, a speakers bureau, pick me up, um, and they didn't. And so things
Okay.
like that. And now I'm in negotiations on a book with a publisher, and I'm sort of bracing myself for a setback there. And so some of this is just communications and communicating to a larger. We had some successes, as you know, which is I did publish an article in the Harvard Business Review, and it was nominated as best of issue, and that's launched us into a completely different strata of conversations. Um, I think I'm just impatient at this point. What's happening is we're talking to people, they want to do it. Um, we're in a post zero interest rate world, and there's not as much ambient money, and
Right.
um, and so that's one thing. But the other thing is, general rule: if you want to have a thriving business, sell to what people already believe. Don't try to sell a change and
Right.
a
Right.
service or a product at the same time. And I'm not interested in reproducing HR, traditional HR. I think
Right.
reproducing a traditional HR is in fact immoral. And so, uh, uh, and so what that means is, you know, that we have to cut this course where we 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 are selling something that people have to change their minds a little bit to want. And honestly,
Right.
I think it's a little bit, but if you actually start sharing this with people, they feel like I'm talking about Mars.
Right.
Some people are get it pretty quick, but it's not the easiest sell in the world.
And have you found anything? I mean, that seems like a norm. That seems like something that every Mira fellow would hopefully be going through at some point, because you do, if you want to push forward, you really do have to change people's minds. Have you found any techniques that have worked better, or any ways of approaching people?
Yeah, yeah, some. Um, so uh, one of the first of all, broadcast your message as broadly as possible because you
Hmm.
might find people who already agree with you. And
Right.
so just a larger sample size is more likely to find people who agree with you. And
Hmm.
so that's one. Uh, I will say that the kind of street cred that the HBR article gave us
Right.
um, is incredible. It's incredible to go into a sales meeting and they've read the article and they've already heard the best thing you could ever possibly say, and they've taken it on board, and you
Right.
just say what sparked for you in that article that you really found was useful. So that was really great. Um, the third thing is you have to reel them in like fish that have a soft mouth, and so what that is, you can't just set the hook on the first day. Um,
Right.
you have to draw them in with a little bit of value. And sometimes the value is just brainstorming on a cool idea. And then you talk to them again and you say, just a little bit more value. Hey, here's this article I wrote. I think you might really like it. And then a little more value. I'm wondering if you'd want to come on the podcast
Hmm.
and talk to people. Now you're really in a relationship with them. And then you say, gosh, that was a great conversation. Would you have any interest in actually, doing a solo bubble chart, which is a one person exercise, not the
Hmm.
corporate version, but that one person gets value out of looking at how you're allocating your attention to work. And now you're really talking to them about something that's personal to them in their world.
Right.
And then
Right.
you say, do you think that your teams would find value in this? Now, every single one of those steps, you provided value and asked for nothing or very little. Um,
Right.
I don't know how to take that last step and say, okay, give us some money. I don't know how to do that. That's that's a bit of a mystery,
Uh-huh.
and uh, so working on that. But I can reel them right in up to the edge of the boat, and I can start to lift them in the boat. And I
Right.
don't really know how to get them on the boat. So
Well, I
that's
think there are plenty. If you can get them that close, there are people who know how to do that last
yeah,
little
and
into the
big,
boat.
big and small. Big and
Yeah.
small, really big. Some of the largest companies in the world
Yeah.
are talking to us uh, about it. Some of the top uh, big five consulting firms are talking to us about it. Um, if we land one, we're in
Right.
trouble.
That's exciting.
So yeah, so
That's exciting.
it's exciting. It's exciting, but it's like um, and here's the other thing that's I think really worth looking into for Mira Fellows is John Kania, spelled Kania, wrote an article called "The Water of Systems Change," and
Hmm.
it talks about if you really want to change a system, you have to start at mental model, at the
Right.
bottom at mental model. And then you have to build up to operational practices that instantiate the mental model. But if you try to do operational practices without changing the mental model, they won't survive. And I think
Right.
he doesn't go deep enough because I think underneath mental model, there's values. So,
Right.
my mental model change that I'm pitching is uh, employees are customers, work is a
Right.
product, all companies are multi sided. But the value statement under that is it is wrong to treat people like things. And that is a value statement that is not built into um, uh, money and profit and shareholder value. It says even if shareholder value was served by treating people badly, you shouldn't do that.
Right.
And and the truth is, we do it all the time. And so going down to that next level, talking about the morality of it, do I talk about those things? Oftentimes, I don't even talk about the mental model change. I just equip teams to run differently
Right.
because they don't need it. You told me that actually with the first time I applied this inside Mira. Thank you for being our prototype. But you said, I don't need to know that theory stuff. Just give me the tools. And so, great. That's a great path. Um, it's a lot easier to do when the whole company is in the room.
Right. It's a little different working in a giant
A little
company.
different when you're rolling it out to a manager who's in a large company and they're going to start going against the grain of their organization.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap it up here. I want to make sure we get finished on time. I like to end with just I think we all, as people trying to make something new happen, find ways to get in our own way. So I'd love to hear if you have any little anecdote of ways that you get in your own way and things that you've discovered to like overcome those get in your own
Yeah,
way vibes.
yeah, I do get in my own way. Um, because I was raised by scientists who valued knowledge as the ultimate currency.
Hmm.
Um, I don't like to talk about money. So, me taking that step of bringing people into the boat requires me to say, turn into Dr. Evil and say,
Right.
you know, that will be $100. And they say, no, that's not enough. I say $10 million because I have no idea what I should charge. But also I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, look, like if they're really capable, they can figure it out themselves, right? Just you know, you can just derive it from first principles if you really want. But
Right.
and by the way, some people have done that. They've heard everything that I've said and they are actually doing it without hiring my company. Thumbs up on
Yeah.
that.
That's
I
so
will
cool. Yeah.
absolutely go, people. That's great. We're not trying to control it. We're trying to get it into the world. But my money is gauche.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
was raised to believe that money was low class.
Right.
And um and so I have people on my team now who are fine talking about money, and so we have them work on the last mile. But that's one of my ways that I get in my own way.
Money's a thing. It's difficult to value your brand new thing to other people.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for giving us the time here. It's really fun to get to know you a little bit better. See what you're up
Yeah,
to.
that was really fun. That was really fun. I enjoyed that a lot. Um, I don't often dig all the way back to the third grade in my stories.